If you step onto that stage tonight, I'll tell the entire room you stole $2 million from the clinic." She said that right before the speech about an honest family. 300 guests, the sponsoring bank, and the local press were waiting for my father to step up to the podium. They needed a clean name to wash old debt. And I was the only one who hadn't been stained. And I was the only one no longer protected. Some families don't disown you. They turn you into the scapegoat. If your parents fabricate a charge in the middle of a wedding, will you bow your head, or will you let the truth tear everything apart? Before I continue, I really want to know where you're listening to this story in your life. Maybe it's a quiet evening. Maybe it's in the middle of thoughts you've never said out loud. Leave a line below. And if you've ever been misunderstood by your own family, stay with me until the end. Because that night, there wasn't just one secret under the wedding lights. I'm Naomi Brooks, 28 years old. I work in finance. Numbers don't lie. In finance, 1 + 1 always equals 2. But in my house, numbers always shifted with my parents' greed. 7 years ago, I left the house where our family clinic had operated for 3 decades. The family said I left because I couldn't handle the pressure, that I failed, that I had issues. They said it long enough that people nodded along. I didn't argue. I built my career somewhere else, step by step, staying away from family meetings where every question turned into an accusation. I only came back for my sister Claire's wedding. The invitation came from her fiancé, not from my parents. When I walked into the hotel ballroom, I saw the bank's logo placed right beside the podium. $2 million for the clinic expansion project. I recognized the structure of that loan. I had built it myself before I left 7 years ago. Last week, a misdirected email landed in my inbox. Attached was a scanned copy of the most recent loan file. My name sat beneath the line committing financial responsibility. The signature looked familiar, but the curve in the B was drawn longer than my original. I had removed my name from every legal document tied to the clinic 3 years ago. Daniel, my husband, looked at the documents and said only one short sentence. "They're using your name." He didn't ask what I was going to do. He waited for me to decide. In the dressing room, my mother gripped my wrist. Her lips curved into a fake smile for the guests while her words dripped with poison. I looked straight into her eyes. "I filed a fraud complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau 3 days ago. This morning, the bank sent a confirmation. The file has been transferred to the Criminal Investigation Department. They don't need a response from me. They just need to show up at the right time." I knew I had just activated a time bomb at my father's feet. I read that number twice. 14. Not a single contract. Not a clerical mistake. A whole chain of documents properly filed, enough to bind my name to that $2 million loan as a true cosigner. I stepped into the empty hallway behind the ballroom, where the warm lights dimmed and the music was muffled by thick glass walls. I opened each attachment. 3 documents had been filed just 2 weeks before the wedding. At that time, I was preparing a board presentation at my company, thousands of miles away. They chose the exact moment I couldn't be here. This loan wasn't backed only by the clinic's assets. It relied on my clean credit history. No bad debt, no lawsuits, no bankruptcy. My name was the guarantee they needed for the bank's approval. I scrolled to the last page of one contract. My signature appeared beneath the line accepting joint liability. I opened the archive folder on my phone and found a scan of my original signature from 3 years ago. I zoomed in on every stroke. The B in Brooks always stopped at the second curve. In this scan, that curve was extended by a millimeter, small enough that if I hadn't signed my name hundreds of times, I might not have noticed. Daniel didn't ask. He stood there, letting me steer my own life. Laughter from the ballroom rolled out like waves. Claire was probably being walked down the aisle. 14 documents, 3 recently filed, all bearing my name. 14 documents, the 3 newest submissions. They had reused the shadow of who I was 3 years ago, the shadow of a daughter who signed anything, because her father said, family comes first. But the Naomi of today no longer holds the pen of blindness. A second email from the bank appeared. Disbursement is scheduled within 24 hours after a final verification. 24 hours. I closed the screen. Inside the ballroom, my father was speaking about family sacrifice. My mother sat in the front row, nodding at every round of applause. They just needed me to stay silent one more day. Just one day for the money to be wired. I looked at the dark screen reflecting my face. 3 years ago, I removed my name from every legal tie to the clinic. And if that file were approved, the bank would discover what my family hadn't accounted for. The scent of disinfectant from the back hallway reminded me of the clinic's old emergency room. Not as strong as a hospital, but enough to pull me back to the small room where I used to sit for hours at a scratched wooden desk, reconciling books for the clinic for free during my sophomore year of college. During the day, I went to class. At night, I entered data, reviewed insurance invoices. My father would walk by, place a hand on my shoulder, and say, "Family comes first." Back then, those words felt like a warm blanket. I believed them. In my senior year, I received a job offer in Atlanta. The salary was enough to rent my first apartment. I declined. The clinic was struggling with delayed insurance reimbursements. My father said he needed someone who understood the system, someone he could trust. I stayed, working nearly full-time without pay. Claire was still in high school, and I thought I was protecting her future. The music from the ballroom pulled me back to the present. I leaned against the glass wall and reopened the bank email. 14 documents, $2 million, 3 recent submissions. Cold numbers that knew nothing about the evenings I sat alone under fluorescent lights. I looked down at my wrist. The thin silver bracelet was still there, engraved with one small word, truth. My grandfather gave it to me on my high school graduation day. His voice, rough from cigarettes, once told me, "The truth doesn't need to shout." The sentence was never loud, but it always stayed. 3 years ago, I discovered a transfer from the patient insurance fund into an undisclosed construction expense account. Not large, but enough to make me stop. I asked my father. He said it was only a temporary adjustment. I checked further. The numbers didn't match. I signed papers to remove my name from the clinic's legal documents a week later and left. I didn't report it. I didn't speak to the press. I chose silence because I thought shielding my family from scandal was the last way I could protect them. 7 years passed. They told the story about me in the most convenient way for them. I let them. Inside the wedding hall, applause rose as Claire walked in. I stood at the edge of the hallway, between the smell of disinfectant and the scent of wedding flowers, feeling 2 worlds collide. Family comes first. That phrase once made me sacrifice my own opportunities. Now it was being used to force a criminal charge onto me. I touched the bracelet lightly, the cold metal against my skin. The truth doesn't need to shout. But if I stayed silent one more time, that truth would be buried beneath $2 million and 14 signatures bearing my name. The music faded as my father stepped onto the stage. He adjusted the microphone and looked around the crowded room with the familiar smile of a doctor who had saved thousands of patients. "My family has always believed in the medical ethics," he said, his voice clear through the speakers. "We've overcome hardships through honesty and responsibility." Applause filled the room. I stood at the back of the hall, looking at the bank's logo beside the podium. He continued, his voice slowing. "Even when there are personal challenges, poor decisions, a family must protect its reputation." He paused. "Not everyone born into this family is strong enough to carry responsibility." A few people turned to look at me. Some whispered. My mother gently placed her hand on my elbow as if to pull me back into my seat. The gesture was so familiar it hurt. I brushed her hand away and walked straight toward the wooden podium. I heard the clear sound of my heels striking the floor. The entire hall fell silent. It was the sound of something breaking that I had waited 7 years for. My father froze, the smile on his face stiffening as I took the microphone. "I did not sign any debt for this clinic. That $2 million is an outright forgery. At this moment, your files are being sealed for review. A few glasses clinked softly against plates and stopped midair. In the front row, Mr. Miller, the bank's representative, closed his black leather folder. The admiration in his eyes was gone, replaced by the cold look of an auditor facing potential bad debt. He didn't need the microphone. His silence was already a verdict. "We just received a request to verify the signature prior to this event," he said, his gaze resting on me. "The loan is currently on hold pending review." A wave of murmurs spread. I heard chairs shifting, someone exhaling sharply. My father held his smile for a few more seconds before it hardened. "Perhaps this is a small misunderstanding," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder as if to pull me back. "I sent the verification request this morning," I said clearly, "before walking into this wedding hall." My mother grabbed the microphone, her voice hissing through the speakers. "You're killing your sister's future, Naomi." I didn't fight for it. I looked straight at the guests who were beginning to stand. "Claire's future cannot be built on a criminal charge in my name. You call it betrayal. I call it the truth." I stepped down from the stage, leaving her amid the screeching feedback of the microphone. A few scattered claps sounded from the back of the hall, then quickly died out. Claire stood frozen, her bouquet drooping lower. Daniel stepped closer beside me, saying nothing. The bank representative exchanged a few words with his colleague, then checked something on his phone. He looked up. "We sent notice of internal review to the clinic's leadership 2 hours ago," he said. "Perhaps you haven't had time to check." 2 hours ago. My father glanced at my mother, then toward the table where his phone lay. He didn't move immediately. The stage light shone directly on his face, revealing sweat at his temple. Guests began whispering louder. A few members of the local medical board stood up, exchanging looks. The atmosphere of a wedding shifted into something else. Cold and sharp like a blade. The bank representative stepped forward, his tone still polite. "Dr. Brooks, we need to speak with you privately right now." I stepped back from the stage. My father looked at me one last time before following them, and in his eyes, for the first time that night, there was no confidence. My father followed the bank representative through the side door into a small hotel conference room. The door closed behind them with a dry click. In the hall, the music had completely stopped. Claire was helped into a chair near the stage. My mother stood frozen, her hands clenched so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Daniel leaned closer to me. "If you want, we can file criminal charges," he said softly, just for me to hear. "Forgery is a serious offense." I didn't answer right away. Through the frosted glass, I saw my father's shadow move inside the room. He bent down, then straightened, a hand touching his forehead. For the first time in my life, I saw him not in control, not the confident doctor in the emergency room, not the man who always knew what to say before a crowd, just a man who was afraid. I remembered the years I wore the Brooks Family Care name badge with almost childlike pride. I once believed that name stood for what was right. I introduced the clinic to friends as if it were part of me. That name once made me stand a little taller when I spoke about my family. Daniel waited. "Naomi?" I looked down at my wrist, the silver bracelet cool against my skin. One more step could push everything beyond this wedding. A criminal file, a headline the next morning, an ending that could never be undone. "I just want them to investigate," I finally said, "and remove my name from all current records, completely." Daniel nodded. He didn't push further. Justice doesn't always need a final blow. Sometimes it just needs you to pull your hand away. The conference room door opened. The bank representative stepped out first, no longer able to maintain his earlier polite neutrality. My father followed slower. He avoided looking me in the eye. "The loan will remain suspended pending completion of the internal review," the man in the blue suit said. "We will follow up in writing." My mother stepped forward, her voice no longer sharp. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked. I didn't answer her. I turned to the bank representative. Please send me written confirmation that my name is no longer attached to any related documents, I said. My voice stayed level, no higher than necessary. He nodded. I wasn't protecting them anymore. Not shielding, not standing in front to absorb anything for them. I just stood there, in a room slowly filling again with scattered conversation, and for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to hold my family's image together. The news spread faster than the music that had just stopped. The event coordinator whispered to Claire's fiancé. The two families stood facing each other in the middle of the hall, their expressions shifting from polite to guarded. One of the main sponsors, the one who had pledged to fund equipment for the new facility, quietly left his table to speak privately with the bank representative. Minutes later, I heard the phrase, temporarily withdrawing our commitment. Claire walked toward me, her wedding dress trailing white across the wooden floor. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. Are you happy now? She said, her voice tight and sharp. You ruined my day just to prove you were right. Some guests turned away, but not far enough not to hear. Daniel stepped beside me, silent. Claire, I said, keeping my voice lower than the tension stretched between us. A future built on a forged signature isn't a future. The words fell between us. She froze, then shook her head as if I had said something foreign. You always think you are more ethical than the rest of us, she said. That clinic feeds this entire family. And that's exactly why it needs transparency, I replied, without raising my voice. Across the hall, my father was speaking quickly with a familiar attorney from the local medical board. My mother sank into a chair, clutching her purse as if holding onto something about to slip away. No one mentioned wedding vows or cake anymore. A hotel staff member approached the bride and groom, whispering something about pausing the ceremony until the situation is clarified. Claire's fiancé pulled her aside. He didn't look at me. Your family needs to handle this first, he said quietly, but loud enough for me to hear. The bank representative returned to the stage. No microphone, but his voice carried clearly. A financial audit process will be initiated this week. We have a duty to protect the institution and all stakeholders. The word audit caused a ripple through the room. This was no longer just between me and my family. It had become formal. Claire looked at me again, anger and fear mixed in her eyes. Who do you think you're saving? She asked. I didn't answer. I looked around the hall that just hours earlier had been filled with white flowers and laughter. Everything was stopping. Not because I wanted destruction, but because the foundation had never been stable. Watching Claire stand frozen among wilting wedding arrangements, my emotions were tangled. The wedding was officially announced as postponed due to internal matters. Guests left in small groups, speaking softly as if they had witnessed an accident. I stood in the slowly emptying hall, listening to the sound of Claire's heels fading away. Her accusation still hung in the air. But beneath the emotion, the audit process had begun. And once the numbers were laid out, there would be no room for stories to replace the truth. The official notice came 3 days after the postponed wedding. The clinic's largest insurance contract, accounting for nearly 40% of its annual revenue, announced a temporary suspension of renewal pending completion of the audit. A short, cold email. Daniel read it aloud in our hotel room, our suitcase still unpacked. That afternoon, the local paper ran a neutral headline, Brooks Family Clinic faces financial audit. No mention of fraud, no mention of forgery. But people in the industry understood enough to keep their distance. 2 partner meetings were canceled. A medical equipment supplier paused deliveries. I didn't go back to the clinic. I didn't need to. A message from a former nurse told me the atmosphere had shifted. Patients were asking questions. Staff whispered at the front desk. My father's reputation, built over 30 years, didn't collapse overnight, but it cracked in a way no speech could cover. That evening, when Daniel went downstairs for coffee, my mother appeared at our door. She didn't knock. She just stood there, hand resting on the handle, as if weighing something too late. You've killed this family, she said as soon as I opened the door. Her voice wasn't angry like it had been at the wedding. It was tired, hoarse. I invited her in. She didn't sit. She looked around the room as if it proved I had truly left them. Your father is being questioned by the board, she said. They're asking about every document, every transfer. I set the silver bracelet on the table between us. The hotel light reflected off the thin metal. The bracelet engraved with truth was the only thing I took with me when I left home 7 years ago. It was my compass, a reminder of who I was. A family shouldn't need a scapegoat, I said quietly. She looked at the bracelet, then at me. Something close to recognition flickered in her eyes, but she turned away before it settled. You always think you stand above us, she murmured. You don't understand how hard it is to protect this name. I looked at her for a long time. I had protected that name with 7 years of silence. Silence didn't make it cleaner. The next morning, I rolled my suitcase out early. Daniel carried my bag. In the hotel lobby, the wedding flowers were gone. Staff were removing white ribbons from the railings. I didn't stop by the house. I didn't stop by the clinic. I sent one final email to the bank confirming my complete removal from all related records, then stepped through the sliding doors into the parking lot. Tampa was behind me, not as a place I was running from, but as a place where I had returned what was never mine to carry. 2 weeks after leaving Tampa, the preliminary audit report was sent to me per my earlier request. No immediate criminal charges, but enough detail for the clinic's board to demand restructuring. My father stepped back from his executive role pending final conclusions. Several longtime employees resigned. The new facility was postponed indefinitely. Daniel placed the printed report on our kitchen table in Chicago. They'll have to sell part of their equity to maintain cash flow, he said. I knew that. And I knew I had the financial capacity to buy part of the clinic if I wanted to. Claire texted that they needed my help. They suggested I purchase shares to keep the assets in the family. I looked at my account balance, the one I built without relying on any forged signature. I wasn't buying back the past. I sent Claire the contact information of the most reputable independent audit firm in the state. Kindness without transparency is just another form of complicity. My phone vibrated again. Claire sent a photo of the clinic late at night, only a few rooms still lit. I remembered the nights I had sat there alone, reviewing every number, believing I was holding everything upright. Her last message had 4 words. Family is still family. I read it, then locked the screen. The next morning, I transferred my investment funds elsewhere, unrelated to Tampa. I sent Claire a short message. Hire an independent auditor. That's the only way. No promises, no accusations. Boundaries aren't loud. They just stand there, between two sides, and they always have a cost. On the flight back to Chicago, I took the silver bracelet from my pocket and fastened it around my wrist. The cool metal touched my skin, enough to remind me that some things don't need endless explanation. Outside the window, clouds layered like blank pages. I didn't win loudly, no public apology. No one walked up to hug me in the hall. The clinic was still navigating its audit. My father had stepped back. Claire's texts became less frequent. My family didn't collapse, but it wasn't intact anymore either. I used to believe silence preserved peace, that it meant maturity, that it meant loyalty. I used to think if I carried the blame quietly, everything would stay stable. But stability built on one person's silence is usually just a delay of a larger truth. I lost the chance for complete reconciliation. I lost the image of being the good daughter. But I kept my name. Justice, I learned, isn't about destroying someone. It's the moment you stop covering up what's wrong. It's setting a boundary without shouting. The truth doesn't please anyone, but it gave me back a clean name. I don't know if one day my parents will look back differently. Maybe they'll tell this story another way. That part isn't mine anymore. I only know that for the first time, my signature belongs to me. And I'm no longer the scapegoat holding up a name built on forgery. The story you just heard is fictional, inspired by life situations many people may have experienced in their own way. The content was created with AI assistance and edited by humans to offer reflection and emotional value. It does not encourage any extreme actions. What I keep after all of this is simple: honor cannot be borrowed. If there is one gift I can offer you, it is the right to speak your own truth, even if that truth doesn't please everyone. If you stayed until the end, I'm truly grateful. Where are you listening from? On a quiet evening, or in the middle of a crowded day? Leave a line and share. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family or been misunderstood in your own home, I want to hear your story. Every like, every comment, every subscription and notification helps this channel grow and helps this story reach someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, and thank you for choosing to stay.